Jezebel's table. Now again, and if you don't know the story, Jezebel's Ahab's wife, so she's queen, he's king. Now you're caught up. So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel, assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." In other words, let's just see. Let's see what happens here. But the people said nothing. They couldn't even, after 3.5 years of drought, begin to go, maybe we should pay attention to you, because it can't be our fault either. In that context, he says, but Elijah said to them, "I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left." Now you're going to find out for Elijah in a minute, that's an editing as well. Because he was just told by Obadiah that Obadiah had saved 100 prophets, 50 in 2 caves, and he's been feeding them from Jezebel's table. Elijah feels alone because he was alone at the river Kerith. He's been in a widow's house now being cared for. He's standing somewhat alone, even though surrounded by 450 or 700 prophets, 850, whatever it is total, prophets and all of Israel. But he feels alone because he feels like he's the only one standing up for God. But he's not alone. I'm going to tell you in your story, you're never alone. Never. There's always a remnant. There are always those who follow. I told my kids, I can't tell you how many times when they would say, well, everybody's doing it. No, they're not. Well, everybody's sleeping around. No, they're not. And I told them, I said, you're going to find people in college, because I knew it, because it blew my mind when I got there. You're going to find guys, Carver, who's never even kissed a girl. Well, by choice. Not just because they're ugly or goofy or smell bad. Okay? By choice. It can't be true. Well, sure enough. Hey, Dad, I met this guy. He's a godly guy. Man, he's never even dated anybody because he chose not to, because he's waiting for what God has for him. I'm telling you, you are never alone. Tell your children, tell yourself, when Satan lies to you and say, you're the only one left who cares about this kind of stuff. You're the only one who thinks that way. Don't let Satan edit your story, because you are not alone. You are not. There's always somebody else that God has set aside to stand with you. Now we're going to find out in a minute, and I'll just spoil it for you. God says later, I've set aside 7,000. You only knew of 100 that Obadiah told you about. I set aside 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed and will not kiss Baal. They won't do it. You're not alone. You're not alone. As you choose to follow, let me tell you, whatever the editing that is going on in your brain, Scripture will tell you over and over again, you're not alone. Even if no one else stands with you, you're not alone. May His power and His Spirit in you let you have the strength to know how much He loves you, even when you think nobody else does. You're not alone, okay? Driven that home enough. All right, so we go on. It says, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. He says, so get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces, put it on the wood, but not set it on fire. I will prepare the other bull and put it on wood, but not set fire to it as well. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is big G, God. Then all the people said, all right. It's about as far as they committed. It says, then they all said, what you say is good. Sure, let's see what happens. This is going to be a show. So they're ready and they're willing. That's about as much commitment as they got. So ultimately what happens, I got to skip ahead just for the sake of what we're trying to do here. There ultimately is the showdown. Baal and his prophets go dancing around. They have the bull. They cry out all day long. They get desperate enough to start cutting themselves and chanting. Still God doesn't respond, or their God doesn't respond. Elijah makes fun of them a little bit. Still nothing happens. Finally it says, at the time of the evening sacrifice. And timing is important when you look for God's will and what He has for you. It's not just, and I've said this a lot, I think, in here too. I learned a long time ago, just because God told me that's what He wants to do doesn't mean it's when He's going to do it. And I had to learn to hear, oh, that's what you want to do? Now I need to watch. until I see you begin doing it. Sometimes that was years later. But when I heard and went, oh, cool, that's what you want me to do? I'll just go do it. And I edited out that he was the authority and the author of this story. And I just said, cool, got it, I'll run with it. And I fell on my face every single time. So I started just realizing when you tell me something that you want to do, I'm going to wait until I see you doing it before I move very far at all. Because when I see you doing it, then I'll understand the time is right. Elijah does the same thing, and I learned that from Elijah in this story. And Elijah then, it's time for him for the evening sacrifice, and we'll pick up in verse 36. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Is that an authority statement? Who's God? Who's in charge? Who's making this happen? Even though Elijah said it won't rain again until I say so, it's not really his say so, and he knows that because God is God and he is not. He's simply a servant, and now the time has been called. And it says, I have done all these things at your command. You are the authority. Answer me, O Lord. Answer me. Now, let me tell you another just prayer side, if I can, in this. If you can tell God spiritually why he should answer the prayer you're asking, you'll have a real good sense of whether you're actually praying something he desires or something you just desire. If you can't give him a reason why he should do what you're asking him to do, rethink the prayer and rethink the perspective. And I learned that from a friend of mine who was struggling with the situation and couldn't get it resolved. And he said, can we just pray about this? Like, really? You want to pray about this? And really, I'd kind of dismissed it. It was a silly one in my book. And he goes, yeah. And I heard him begin praying, God, you know, I am here because of you today. The reason I have come to this town is to meet with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, so that I may do what you have called me to do. And without my keys, because that's what he had lost and we couldn't find, without my keys, I can't do any of those things you've called me here to do. Will you help me find my keys? I went, that's a pretty good model prayer right there. If I can tell God why he should answer it based on what he's called me to do, then maybe I should pray. And the craziest thing is we found the keys right where we had looked last night, but they weren't there the night before, I promise you. And I went and asked the guy, I said, where'd you find those keys? He goes, I didn't find keys. What keys are you talking about? The ones that are right there where I picked up the groceries from last night. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. And I went, but from then on, that became to be my heart. So Elijah comes in with the same thing and says, hey, listen, I've done all this at your command, so then answer me, Lord. So these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back to you. That says it's not that they would know that you're God and you have the authority to wipe them out, but that they would know that you are God and that you're trying to turn their hearts back to you. Then fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate. In other words, they fell on their faces and cried, "O Lord, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let one of them get away." There's some authority. All of a sudden it shifted a little bit, going, hey, by the way, they're not in charge anymore. Apparently I am. So I'm going to need you to go grab all of them and don't let any of them get away. And they seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to Cushan Ravine, and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go and eat and drink. There's a sound of heavy rain coming." So Ahab went off and he drank, but Elijah climbed to the hilltop, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the seas," he told his servants, and he went and looked. Again, for the sake of time, he does this 7 times. And I want you to understand, even in our prayer and authority within God and under his authority, just because once you pray for it and it's done, doesn't mean that's always going to be the way it's done, because he will always do more than you hope, dreamed, or imagine. So in this case, he's asked once, God respond by fire. Fire falls. Sweet. I can now ask God anything I want to, and he'll just do it. No, he goes up to this, knowing rain's coming. And it takes 7 times. Go and look. Okay, it's not here yet. I'm going to pray again. Go and look. Not here yet. I'm going to pray again. Go and look. It's not here yet. I'm going to pray again. Because I'm still under his authority, and I can't say it's about to rain until he says it's about to rain. So go and look. The seventh time, finally, the servant comes back and says, well, there's a cloud rising from the sea about the size of a man's hand. Then he goes to Ahab and says, you better get in your chariot before the rain stops. You can get down off this mountain. It's time. Go. But he doesn't say it until God shows that he's doing it. In that context. Now, with all this, Ahab gets out. Elijah in power runs ahead of him. You can read the story. Let's find the second or third editorial here as we go into this. Starting from chapter 19. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done. How much did Ahab tell Jezebel?
What he wanted to.
Everything that Elijah had done. That's what the scripture says. Now here's the deal. And I know why you're saying what you're saying, but let me challenge that. And I'm going to challenge it. What he had done and how he killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, May the gods deal with me ever so severely if by this time tomorrow I don't make you like one of them. I think Jezebel edited the story. I think Ahab was he saw it. He experienced it, and he came down and said, man, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you. But Jezebel edited the story and heard only what bugged her. Wait, what happened to my prophets? What happened to my God? I'm going to get defensive about what I have worshipped, what I have seen, because she's the one that brought them all into the kingdom. She's the one that led Israel to this idol worship. And now her gods were destroyed and defeated. So all she hears is not that there is a God in Israel, but that her God is dead. So I'm going to kill him. She edits everything else. I think she hears the whole story, but she only listens to that part. And so she misses what the author is trying to do. The author, just like he was trying to call all of Israel back, is willing to call her back. But she doesn't hear that. So she edits the story and says, may you be like one of them tomorrow. Elijah, and this is what amazes me and why I'm trying to come into this. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. So Ahab called him the trouble of Israel, which we know, well, that wasn't true. Ahab understands he's probably the troubler, but he's got to point a finger somewhere, and But Ahab, I feel a little sorry for Ahab, because Ahab is stuck between Jezebel and a prophet. And if you know much about Jezebel, I may have chosen to be on Jezebel's side at that point too. Because he's stuck between, he's stuck. Either I go with the prophet, I go against my wife who's queen, or I'll just kind of go along with my wife and we'll see what happens. But ultimately, we find out that really him and his family and all of them, because he didn't take the authority he was supposed to take as king, are the cause of this trouble. Jezebel then hears the story but deletes everything but what she wants to hear, that wait, you killed my prophet. Elijah apparently just forgot what happened and deleted it, because when she challenges him and threatens him, he just gets afraid and runs. Does that sound like Elijah? Because it never has to me. The guy who just stood up on the mountain alone and said, there's all these prophets against me, all of Israel's against me, the king and the queen are against me, but holy cow, here we go, let's see what happens. But now one lady who doesn't have the authority threatens his life? Because if she had the authority, she would have just taken it, right? One guy said it this way. He said, if Satan hadn't killed you yet, it's because he doesn't have the authority to. But he can make you afraid. Think about that for a minute. If he hadn't killed you yet, it's because he doesn't have the authority to. But he can make you afraid and can make you run. It's about the same account. So Elijah runs. And he ran for his life. And he came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there. He left his servants there while he himself went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree under it and prayed that he might die. So was Elijah afraid to die? No, I think really what's happening here, and I'm going to wrap up, I promise you, on time-wise. What's really happening here is God in that moment didn't fully do what he asked or expected. I think he thought, hey, when we have this showdown, they'll all turn. When we have this showdown and we kill the prophets, the king and queen both will turn then too, just like Israel does. And they didn't. And this is a thing that I want to challenge you with, and I thought about almost doing an entire sermon on it, but God didn't lead me that way. Be careful of the sucker punch that comes in, because this is as clear an illustration to me as a sucker punch as any I've had. And the sucker punch is the one you don't see coming, that kind of, kidney punch in the back, that kind of wants to take you out. I'm going to tell you, they always show up after great success. You'll come to a great success in a moment of God moving and think, man, I have got this figured out, and boom, and then you'll just get blindsided by something you didn't see coming. Okay? Elijah gets sucker punched, and he goes, wait, that didn't quite turn out like I expected. I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm just going to run. God, take me out if you need to take me out, but that's not what I expected to happen. And when he does, I think the beauty of it is, he says, I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I'm no better than any of my ancestors. Again, he's editing what happened or forgetting the events. Then he laid under the broom tree and died. Again, for the sake of time, you can read it. God sends an angel to care for him. He places bread and water, it says, at Elijah's head. We talked about bread and water the last couple of weeks. The bread of adversity, the water of affliction. That it really is part of what life comes from, is this adversity. And God will lead you through adversity to sustain you even, or to feed you, or to prepare you. And he even calls it in Isaiah 30. He calls it your teacher. And he's trying to teach Elijah something even in this process. He's teaching him how he's going to prepare for him, how he's going to care for him. And it says this angel comes and prepares bread and water and lays it beside his head. And he says, take it. With the strength of all that, I want you to know Elijah then goes, it says 40 days into the wilderness, even farther, arrives at a cave. Now Elijah, again, has forgotten all that the Lord has done somehow. Because when he gets to the cave, here's the revised edition of the author's story. Elijah in verse 10 says this, I've been zealous. Because the Lord comes in and says, what are you doing here? Elijah says, well, hey, Lord, I need you to know I was zealous. I was zealous. I did all I could for you. I stood on that mountain. I was zealous for the Lord Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. It's their fault that I'm here. They rejected your covenant. They've torn down your altars, and they've put the prophets to death with the sword. What prophets got put to death with the sword? Wasn't it Baal's prophets that got put to death with the sword in this moment? But Elijah just edited that out, right? He didn't say, hey, God, man, I've been zealous, and thank goodness you showed up on that mountain and showed that you were truly God, because I'm one of your prophets. And he just goes, I was zealous for you, but they rejected you. They broke down your altars. They put your prophets to death with the sword. And again, I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Are the Israelites trying to kill Elijah? No, we'll make up crazy stories, won't we? We'll make up crazy stories of what we think is going on. What I want you to do, the purpose of this whole message comes down to this sentence. You ready? This is why I preach the whole thing. Okay? If your story starts with I, it will end with insecurity, inadequacy, and possibly even idolatry. But if your story starts with God, it will always end with glory, and I would even challenge you with go. Because the next thing God does after he shows who he is to Elijah, Elijah repeats the exact same story. And when Elijah does, he goes, stop. Here's what I need you to do. Go anoint. Go set this guy up as king. Go get Elisha. Go pass your mantle off. Apparently you're overwhelmed, stressed, and burned out. I'm going to take you out and put Elisha in your place, and he'll do more than you did. I'm paraphrasing. But did you hear what I just said? He's the author. when you edit, be careful your editorial draft and your revisionary statements don't start with I. Because you're not the main character. No matter what you think of yourself. And if they do start with I, they will end with insecurity. Because that's where Elijah is. How's Elijah insecure at this moment? How does Elijah feel inadequate at this moment? Because he rehearsed this story for 40 days as he wandered into the desert. So when God approached him, let me tell you, one of my greatest strengths in my life now is the moment I start spinning on something, I recognize it and I try to deal with it immediately. If I have a thought, I can't, and I'm just spinning the same thought, and it just keeps, whether it's worry, whether it's anxiety, whether it's I should have or I oughta, and it's spinning, I know it's because I am focused on me, and it's creating insecurity, it's creating inadequacy, and possibly even idolatry, because I've forgotten God exists altogether. Because now I'm just spinning. Does that make sense? I've learned pretty quickly the moment I start spinning, I need to stop and rewrite this story and put God as the author and say, God, where are you in this, and what do you need me to do? Because if I do that and I start my story with you, it will always end in glory for you. And I will know what I need to do next, which is to go do whatever that is. All right, good enough. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you use this word. I pray that you use this example that's a different way than that's probably ever been preached before in a sense. But Lord, it is the example that's in there. And Father, I pray that you help us to truly begin to submit to your authorship of our lives. To truly begin to submit to your authority over our lives. That we would be able to see our relationships with you as the one who's in charge over those relationships. To see our job with you as the one who's in charge and who has granted us opportunity in that job to glorify you. To see our lives as knit together, our days as numbered,